Hello, Portlanders, and welcome to Bridgetown Abridged. In our first episode, let's discuss the ballot initiatives that we'll be voting on in the May 16th special election. Portlanders have 4 potential elections a year. The May 16th election is the special district election. The special district election is for local school, water, and rural fire protection district board members, as well as local measures like requests for local tax money or proposed changes to law. You may ask, why are we voting in early May? I like to think it's because we just paid taxes in April, and nothing makes people want to change anything and everything about their government like paying their taxes. Sadly, I can't talk about everything, so let's keep it simple. I'd like to talk about the 2 ballot initiatives we're going to vote on for the City of Portland, so let's give them both a quick rundown. The first measure we have is Measure 26-189, Auditor Charter Changes. The purpose of this measure, in the words of our current city auditor, is to amend the city's charter to increase the independence of the auditor from the city agencies the auditor is responsible for auditing and investigating. Neat. Before we go into the specifics, let's quickly go over what the city auditor does. When you hear audit, if you think taxes or the IRS, then you're not far off. To audit means to examine for the purposes of verification. The IRS, for instance, performs financial audits on people and companies to make sure that they've paid the appropriate taxes. The city auditor also performs financial audits, except that they perform them on city agencies. They also perform audits to measure the agency's efficiency and effectiveness. Basically, if you think of every city agency as a restaurant, the city auditor is kind of like the health inspector. Their job is to make sure that nothing's out of order, everything is neat and tidy, and that everyone is washing their hands. Fine, not that last one, but let's be honest. Every office could use with someone checking in on that. I'd love to go further into this, but I think that's best saved for another video. To go back to the specifics, the measure plans to expand the city auditor's independence by 1. Allowing the auditor to seek advice from independent legal counsel, aka legal counsel not provided by the city government. Right now, the auditor can only seek advice from the city attorney's office. The city attorney's office, which would also be providing advice to any city agency that could be, let's say, under an audit, for instance, meaning that the attorney would be advising both sides of that legal dispute. 2. Giving the auditor more autonomy over their own staffing decisions, such as hiring, compensation, and assignment of work. 3. Designating the auditor's office as a contracting agency. What this would mean is that the auditor's office can get goods and services without going through another city agency. This is important because if they're investigating an agency and need to go through that agency to purchase something, that's a conflict of interest. And 4. Authorizing the auditor to submit their budget requests directly to the city council. Right now, the budget office recommends the size of the auditor's budget to the council, and the auditor can audit the budget office, which again, could be seen as a conflict of interest. To compensate for the additional independence, this measure also contains some new checks on the auditor's office by 1. Requiring regular external reviews of the auditor's office, the results of which would be made public. Nifty. 2. Requiring the auditor to notify the public and provide an opportunity to comment before they change or adopt any administrative rules. 3. Requiring the auditor to adopt policies and rules consistent with the city's workplace and procurement policies. And 4. Continuing the city council's role of monitoring and setting the auditor's budget. In addition to all of this, the measure also formally adds the ombudsman position to the city charter to help protect the office of the ombudsman from any retribution. The city ombudsman, in addition to sounding like a mythological creature, is essentially another auditor, except that their job is to investigate any public complaints against the city government. So that's an overview of the measure, and now I'm going to go over some of the arguments both for and against it. The main arguments in support of the measure really boil down to a few main points. 1. This measure makes the city auditor more independent, and auditors can perform their jobs better when they're more independent. 2. The changes in this measure are fairly standard for city auditors in other cities. And 3. The additional checks on the auditor balance out the new independence given to them. The arguments against come in several different flavors. 1. One perspective states that this gives the auditor too much independence, and that the main check on their power, the fact that they're an elected office and the public can vote them out, is not a powerful enough of a check. 2. Another perspective states that this does not go far enough, and allowing the city council to define the auditor's budget still hampers them from doing their job. And 3. One final perspective states that it's not appropriate to put these changes into the city charter, since that will restrict the government from being more flexible in the future. In terms of support in favor and against this measure, in my research I found that the following organizations and individuals supported it. The Willamette Weekly and the Portland Mercury, the PDX City Club, 3 former Portland city auditors, Jewel Lansing, Gary Blackmer, and Lavon Griffin Valade, former Oregon Secretary of State Gene Atkins, the Association of Local Government Auditors, the U.S. Ombudsman Association, the League of Women Voters of Portland, the National Lawyers Guild, the Portland chapter, and Portland City Commissioner Nick Fish. I could not, however, find any organizations or prominent individuals who opposed Measure 26-189, but that doesn't mean that they're not out there. Wrapping up 26-189, I'm going to dive right into Measure 26-194, Transient Lodging Tax Charter Amendment. The transient lodging tax is the tax that a guest pays when they stay in a hotel, motel, vacation rental, or any other short-term rental in the city of Portland. This measure has been brought to our ballot by the City Council to clarify that the transient lodgings tax applies to online businesses. The wording of this current law allows certain businesses like HomeAway, which is owned by Expedia, to not pay this tax. Specifically, this measure allows the City Council to 1. Impose the tax obligations on businesses that facilitate short-term rentals but might not fit the definition of owner or operator. Think about companies like Airbnb, where the guest pays Airbnb, but Airbnb does not own the actual lodgings that the guest is staying in. 2. Begin to tax payments that might not fit into that original definition of payments for lodging. And 3. Allowing the council to make such changes by ordinance rather than having to seek additional voter approval in the future. Let's jump right into those arguments for and against. In favor of the measure, it has been said that the original tax clearly should apply to these modern companies, and HomeAway has been exploiting a loophole in the law. It's also been said that by not paying this tax, this gives online rentals an unfair advantage over other lodging companies that have to pay the lodgings tax. And by changing the law to allow the council to interpret the tax, this allows the council to better respond to further changes in lodging technologies. I could only find one argument against this measure, which is that some believe that this is a power grab that will rob citizens of their ability to decide how the council applies the tax, since this change allows the council to make any future changes without voter approval. In terms of support both in favor and against this measure, in my research I found the following organizations and willamette who supported it: Willamette Weekly, the Portland Mercury, and Street Roots. Opposing this measure, I could only find that HomeAway has come out against it, which I'm sure comes as a huge surprise. Well, that wraps up my overview of the 2 ballot initiatives for the City of Portland in the May 2017 election. I'd like to thank you for checking out my video, and if you found it helpful, I'd really love it if you'd share it with others. Have a great day, and happy voting.